Hello friends, welcome to PSC Kalari. In this video, we will try to cover and summarize the historical background of Indian Constitution. So let's begin with understanding what is the Constitution. The Constitution of a country lays down the structure of the political system under which its people are to be governed. It establishes the main organs of the state. The legislature, the executive, and the judiciary defines the powers, demarcates their responsibilities, and regulates their relationship with each other and with the people. Now we move on to understand how did this all begin. There was an act called the Regulating Act in 1773. This act laid the foundation of the central administration in India. It was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of the East Indian Company. It designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal, and likewise Warren Hastings, as shown in the picture, was the first Governor General of Bengal. Later, the Regulating Act was passed in 1774. This act established a Supreme Court at Fort William, Calcutta. It consisted of one Chief Justice and 3 other judges. It acted as the apex court of the country. The first Chief Justice was Elijah Impey. Moving forward, we see that the Pitt's India's Act was passed in 1784 to address the shortcomings of the previous acts by bringing the East India Company's rule in India under the control of the British government. This act also sought to separate the political and commercial functions of the company. After a period of 10 years, the Charter Act was passed in 1793 by the Parliament of the Great Britain, under which the monopoly of the company's trade was extended for another 20 years. After a period of 20 years, the Charter Act of 1813 ended the monopoly of the East India Company's trade in India. However, the company's monopoly in trade with China and the trade in tea with India was kept intact. This lasted, however, till 1833, when the next charter abolished the trade of the company. Charter Act 1833, also known as the St. Helena Act 1833 or the Government of India Act 1833, was passed by the British Parliament to renew the charter of the EIC. This act made the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of British India. William Bentinck was the first Governor General of British India. Next, the Charter Act of 1853 was the last Charter Act passed for the East India Company. It was passed on expiry of the Charter Act of 1833. The charter was renewed, but no substantial changes were made. However, open competition for civil service recruitment was introduced. Moving forward, the Government of India Act 1858 marked the beginning of a new chapter in the constitutional history of India. The Act, also known as the Act for the Good Government of India, this act provided for the liquidation of the EIC, transferred the power of government, territories and the revenue to the British Crown. Governor General was made the Viceroy of India. The first Viceroy was Lord Canning. This act also created a new office called the Secretariat of State for India. They had complete authority and control over Indian administration. The first Secretary of State was Lord Stanley. Last Secretary of State was Lord William Francis Hare. Then we have the Indian Councils Act of 1861, which was passed by the British Parliament to make substantial changes in the composition of the Governor General's Council for legislative and executive purposes. The most significant feature of this act was the association of Indians with the legislative work. That is to say, it introduced for the first time the representative institutions in India. It accorded the statutory recognition to the portfolio system. Following this act was the Indian Councils Act of 1892. This act sought to increase the functions of Legislative Council and gave them the power of discussing the budget and addressing questions to the executive. Then we have the Indian Councils Act 1909, also known as the Morley-Minto Reforms, which was passed by the British Parliament in an attempt to widen the scope of legislative councils, pacify the demands of moderates in the Indian National Congress, and to increase the participation of Indians in the governance. It provided for the association of the Indians with the Executive Council of the Viceroy and the governors. Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the first Indian to join the Viceroy's executive councils. Moving ahead, the Government of India Act 1919, also known as the consequence of the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. It was under this act that bicameralism and direct elections was brought into India. It created new office of the High Commissioner for India in London. It provided for the establishment of the Public Service Commission. Carrying forward, we have the Government of India Act 1935, which derived its material from 4 key sources: report of the Simon Commission, discussions at the Round Table Conference, the Third Round Table Conference, the White Paper of 1933, and the reports of the Joint Select Committee. This act ended the system of diarchy introduced by the Government of India Act 1990 and provided for establishment of a Federation of India to be made up of provinces of British India and some or all of the princely states. The power between the centre and the units were in terms of 3 lists, namely the federal list, the provincial list, and the concurrent list. The residuary powers were vested with the Governor General. In 1946, a cabinet mission was composed of 3 cabinet ministers of England. The members were Patrick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps, and Alexander. They arrived in March 1946 and was announced on 16th May 1946. The objective of the mission was to devise a machinery to draw up the Constitution of Independent India, make arrangements for the interim government. Thus, the mission was like a declaration of Indian independence, and it was according to the proposals of the Cabinet Mission that the Constituent Assembly was formed. Finally, in 1947, after a long struggle, the Indian Independence Act was passed. It declared India as an independent and sovereign state. It established responsible governments at both the centre and the provinces. 2 dominions were constituted, India and Pakistan. With this, friends, we conclude the acts that led to the making of the Constitution and the independence of India. We now take a quick glance of what we discussed. Regulating Act 1773, the first step to regulate the East India Company. Pitt's India Act 1784, Board of Control to supervise the administration of the company. Charter Act 1793, company was given monopoly of trade. Charter Act 1813, company was deprived monopoly of trade. Charter Act 1833, Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India. Charter Act 1853, the competitive exam in civil services. Government of India Act 1858, the control was directly under the British Crown. Indian Councils Act 1861, the portfolio system was introduced. Indian Councils Act 1892, representative system in India. Indian Councils Act 1909, separate electorate for Muslims. Government of India Act 1919, High Commissioner of India in London and bicameralism. Government of India Act 1935, provincial autonomy was introduced. Indian Independence Act 1947, 2 independent dominions of India and Pakistan were formed. So that's all for now. Stay tuned with us for our further sessions, and don't forget to like, subscribe and share if you found it helpful. Also, please leave a comment below if you have any suggestions for us to improve or corrections to make. Thanks for watching, friends. Goodbye.